Hi there, and welcome to Considering Comic Books. This week, we're going to have a slight deviation from our usual subject matter, which is straight up comics. This week, we're going to be talking to a friend of mine. He is a tremendously talented horror novelist called Rich Hawkins. Before I talk about his stuff, we should talk about the fact that horror in comics has been massive and has influenced way back from the 50s onwards. Some of my favourite stuff at the minute would be stuff like Infidel by Pornsak Pinishote, I believe her name is. Jeff Lemire's Gideon Falls. Obviously, Mignola's Hellboy. One of my favourite titles of all time is Hellblazer, whether it be the early Jamie Delano stuff through Garth Ennis, the Paul Jenkins. It just had a tremendous run, and it was easily one of the best horror titles ever. Then you had Alan Moore's early Swamp Things that delved, or at least dipped a toe into the horror genre, if not outright being horror. So, comic books for me, things like The Cult with Jim Starlin and Bernie Wrightson, which was a Batman book that was ostensibly a horror, the Red Rain trilogy from the Batman Elseworlds. These things have all been, massive influences on me, comics that I've loved, and obviously this led me to the horror novel genre, where I would read guys like Stephen King. You can't ignore him. He's too big to ignore. Clive Barker, people like this. Up until more recently, guys like Dave Moody, and indeed my friend Rich, who I'm reading from his Amazon page, just so everyone knows. Rich Hawkins, he hails from deep in the West Country, where a childhood of science fiction and horror films set him on the path to writing his own stories. He credits his love of horror and all things weird to his first viewing of John Carpenter's The Thing, one of my all-time favourite movies, an absolute classic, and probably one of the few reboots that I think is warranted. Rich's debut novel, The Last Plague, was nominated for a British Fantasy Award for Best Horror Novel in 2015. His sequel, The Last Outpost, was released in 2015, and the final novel, The Last Soldier, was released in March 2016. He has a new book out, Maniac Gods, which I highly recommend you go and check out. It sounds absolutely bloody fantastic, and I've ordered my copy literally about 5 minutes ago. So, Rich, how are you doing, mate?
Pretty good, thanks. Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's good to be on here. I saw I had to follow Pat Mills, so it's a bit of a tough act to follow, but I'll try my best.
Pat is a tough act to follow, but we all bring our own unique individual interests and passions and skill sets to what we write, and your passion is clearly horror. I was looking through your back catalogue, and you've contributed a massive amount of anthologies, things like that, and then obviously your own books. So a lot of your horror it stems from, as you say, your first viewing of John Carpenter's The Thing. What was it about the horror genre that really grabbed you then? I know what it was that grabbed me, so I'm always fascinated to hear what other people have to say.
I think several things really. When I was a kid, I was always loved monsters and all that sort of stuff, like werewolves and vampires and all those sort of traditional monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I got a bit older, and I watched The Thing, and that sort of like opened up a new world really of what's possible with horror and all that sort of stuff.
The best thing about The Thing I found was that what they were doing with the special effects and the prosthetics, and it opened up this doorway to the idea that it was something that sort of Ridley Scott had done in I think it was 1979 Alien, and it was the idea that space monsters weren't these sort of goofy looking guys in suits. They could be. They could
Yeah,
be.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the idea that they could be absolutely terrifying, and the idea with the thing. The best thing about it was a claustrophobic, paranoid, trip into this absolutely desolate horror environment where something was
yeah,
in there with this group of guys. And I remember, excuse my language, but I remember watching it the first time and being scared shitless because it was it was so claustrophobic, and you didn't know who to trust. And I believe the original short story was called "Who Goes There," and I read
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Who wrote that? John Campbell? Not sure.
I think so. I'm not sure. It's one of those ones. It was either him or there's part of me that thinks it was Richard Matheson, but I'm probably wrong.
I think it was John. Might have been John W. Campbell. I did buy it.
Yeah,
I thought it was basically that story and like some of his other work. And to be honest, I read the story, but once you compare the story itself to like Carpenter's film, it's I don't know.
well, yeah,
The film seems a lot more visceral, and
yeah. Well, it was Carpenter. Carpenter was really a visionary, and what he did back then on a budget. I mean, this was a guy who was, he was writing his own scripts, shooting his own films, doing his own soundtracks, and some of my favorite films are Carpenter films. Like my favorite movie of all time is Escape from New York.
great film. Yeah.
It's amazing, but it had everything for me. It had the dystopia, but it also had that urban desolation, and the really good anti-hero, the anti-authoritarian message at the end.
Yeah.
The fuck you to the man. I just
Exactly. Yeah.
everything about it was great. So I mean, Carpenter was a visionary. So I think he, if you look at guys like that, and early Ridley Scott and James Cameron, they were they could take something that was fairly basic and run with it. Like they could make it even more visually spectacular, and use these amazing special effects artists that were around, like Stan Winston and things like that, to create something absolutely amazing. But having read some of your stuff, you have a style that is actually quite sparse with the monster. You like to leave a lot of the monster to the reader's imagination, almost.
Yeah, I try to. I just think that if you describe it too much, then it sort of spoils it a little bit for the reader. I prefer to sort of give them something to work with, and let their imaginations fill in the blanks in that,
Do you find that I think some of the best stories written, especially, are stories where a lot of it is left to the reader to like you say, fill in the blanks. So it's little throwaway phrases, or little things that draw you in, but are never really expanded upon, that really have the most impact, because you're forced to use your own imagination then.
Yeah. I mean, it's always more scary when if you imagine something, isn't it? I mean, when someone just lays out, in precise detail what a monster looks like, then it's not. I don't find it overly scary, but I mean, if you can just sort of, put a few well-placed phrases in and sort of leave the rest to the imagination, I think it's a lot more powerful.
What would be what's some of your favorite examples of movie monsters? Stuff that you found particularly effective, not just movie monsters, I guess, but horror monsters in general.
Well, obviously the Thing's, way up there. What else? We've got Alien.
Yeah.
Predator, which has always been
great,
one of my
classic
favourites. Would Predator count as a movie monster? Yeah, I suppose it would count as a monster, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah.
What else? The Blob. I mean, the 80s Blob.
The Blob. You're
Really
talking
well.
about the remake. Oh, that was fantastic.
Yeah, that. I mean, the Blob actually scares me on like sort of a fundamental level where
Yeah.
just thought of being absorbed, like while you're alive. I find the same thing with The Thing. I find that terrifying.
Well, yeah.
I'd rather just be eaten by like a. I don't find being eaten by T-Rex. Of course, it's terrifying still, but I mean, it'll be over in like a second because
Yeah, you'd be bitten in half. Your body would go into shock and you'd die. No, I remember the most affecting scene in the Blob actually was whenever the old man was taken in with the Blob on his hand. He was taken into the hospital, and the girl and the guy who brought him in. And anyway, it makes its way across the ceiling and drops down onto the guy, and she grabs his hand, which is protruding from the Blob, and it absorbs the rest of him, and you see it. And I think I was a young teen when I watched that movie, and I lay in my bed sweating bullets because I was afraid that the Blob was on my ceiling. I was like, that fucking thing, it would just come in under the door and then go up the wall and then drop on me. And I was...
You can't kill it, I mean... Unless you freeze the thing and, you're pretty, Ugh.
Yeah, it was a big...
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting triggered just thinking about it right now. So.
Oh, triggered! Don't get us started on trigger warnings. Rich, one of Rich's favorite things is memeing on Facebook, and his memes make my dreams. Yeah, big time. I mean, I think we're from a generation where it was okay to be sort of grossly offensive. I think political correctness has definitely ground us the wrong way. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, most definitely. I tried to sort of stay away from terms like political correctness, because I mean, it's just some people like me and you sort of we know what the definition of it, but to other people it's a different definition where. I see people say on Facebook that just means you're being polite, but it's more than that though. Isn't it? You know what I mean? It's sort of
I mean, I agree with you. I think political correctness is I'm from the George Carlin school, where I think it is fascism masquerading as manners, right? That's what I think it is.
It's definitely thereabouts, isn't it?
I mean, it's telling you what to think, and if you don't think that way, then you are to be ostracized and criticized, and essentially in the age of Twitter and stuff like that, it can mean the end of your career. So I have issues with political correctness. That's not to say that I don't have progressive values that I hold, and I don't think I think the two have become conflated, because ultimately I'm a liberal person, and I believe in a lot of the same things that political correctness promotes. I just don't like political correctness. So I don't, the idea that saying certain things would affect equality. Well, I'm a big proponent of equality in every sense, but someone coming along and trying to police how I think and how I act and the things that I say, that to me is not, it's not how you promote equality.
Yeah, I mean, that's very close to how I feel about it, really. I mean, I would call myself a centre-left liberal.
Yes, I would be the same.
I mean, equality for everyone. That's what I want. I don't want anyone to be sort of, oppressed or anything. But it's difficult because you can say something that's not. It's a bit edgy, you might say, and
an edgy boy comment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Before you know it, you've got like a shitstorm in the comment section, and everyone's.
Well, I have read the book So You've Been Publicly Shamed by John Ronson. Now, Ronson is a big old liberal, and he would very much advocate for progressive values or what have you. He's very left leaning, but he's also an advocate of forgiving people who have accidentally said the wrong thing, and I think that we as a culture have forgotten how to do that. So, if you said something bad and it can be, or accidentally offensive or whatever, and it's on your Twitter feed, and say someone can find it on your Twitter feed from 10 years ago, then, you're held to this standard that you haven't changed in 10 years, you're still that person, and that, you must be therefore guilty, and, you can't apologize for it. You can't go, oh, I'm sorry, that was an immature opinion that I had at a time in my life when I wasn't really, I wasn't as well developed as a person as I am now. But people they don't want to hear that. They just want to look at maybe the offensive thing that you said and go, no, you're this, and you can never be anything else, and you should never work or have anything nice happen to you again, you horrible Trump-loving bigot, So
it's very difficult. I mean, I try my best to sort of stay balanced, and it's two sides to every argument in every situation. But there are people on both sides that are legitimately insane, or just trying to cause trouble or advance their own agenda.
Yes, there's a lot of narrative pushing.
Just unfortunately, it just happens to being in the sort of writing community that I tend to sort of encounter the crazy far left people more often than the crazy far right people.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. In our sort of respective communities, me being in comics and you being in horror writing, you would definitely tend. Liberals, I've always contended, gravitate towards the arts. You see.
Yeah.
So we encounter the crazy far lefties way more than we would encounter the crazy far righties. I think if you were in business or something, you'd encounter the business or the right wingers a lot more. And I have equally as much an issue with them and their crazy politics. It's just in the spheres that we inhabit, we probably run into the left, the lunatic left a bit more, don't we?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, the problem with the far left and all, so even though just the left, they control a lot of media.
Yes.
Especially sort of mainstream media. I mean, obviously the right's got its own sort of media, but it's a bit more sort of to the fringe in a way, isn't it? And it's whereas you see I've noticed over the last a few years that certain terms have entered the mainstream.
Yeah.
On Channel 4 News and
yes.
And, and it's a bit troubling.
Well, do you know what it reminds me of? Sorry to cut you off, Rich. Do you know what it reminds me of? Because I'm going to segue here very nicely. I think you'll appreciate this, but it reminds me of another Carpenter classic, They Live.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and anyone who knows who has watched They Live, if you haven't watched it, I think especially in today, Carpenter was a visionary and he was way ahead of his time. And I think, especially in modernity, where we have this, mass marketing, corporate push towards, getting ideas out there into your brain through advertising and being incredibly smart, subversive techniques, neurolinguistic programming, things like that. Well, They Live was the idea that we'd been infiltrated by these beings from a different planet who were controlling how we thought as a society and as a culture. And Roddy Piper finds a pair of sunglasses. Oh, what a legend! He finds a pair of sunglasses that allows him to see these guys for what they are and see all the underlying messaging that has been implanted in our TV shows, on our billboards, in our magazines. And, John Carpenter again being way ahead of his time, creating a horror masterpiece.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite spooky, really, in a sort of a way. I mean,
Because it's come true.
Yeah, it was almost like, certain people have looked at the film and are using it as a, some sort of blueprint,
Yeah, and I mean another film that I love, and I think it resonates. It's not a horror film, but I think if you look at it as a horror film, you can definitely see. I mean, it's almost like you could put it in it would slide into that genre now. I don't think it was meant for the genre at the time because it was based on a play and it's based on real events, and that is The Crucible. And
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The Crucible stars Daniel Day-Lewis, and it is about the Salem witch trials and the hysteria that follows these women who are accused of being witches. How it's almost like everybody within this small New England community is trying to one up each other for how hysterical and horrible their experiences with these supposed witches can be, and it seems to be it just grows out of control, and it's mob mentality, sort of centered on this very small community, and there's these people who, through being odd or outside of the social norms of that community, they become the targets of these witch trials. And you could look at social media and see that every single day, that same mob herd mentality that we have as a species. And I think the Crucible is an amazing film as a case study for what people are like whenever they become incredibly tribal, puritanical, and paranoid, hysterical.
Yeah, yeah. It's so weird as well, because I mean, I think that most people are generally decent people.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a few sort of nutcases who, want to roll things up and, smash the patriarchy and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Fake bollocks and that. And I think just people, like normal people, just sort of get swept up on it. I mean, it's especially online. It's just so easy just to like
get sucked
join in the lynch mob and just
Well, there's been flame wars since the early days of the internet. How would you say that this? Do you feel that modern society would sort of have much of an impact on your horror writing, or do you like to go backwards, go back to simpler times whenever people were, less connected through technology and more, out in the wilderness? I noticed that a lot of your writing is sort of post-apocalyptic, and do you prefer that sort of survival type stuff as opposed to the more sort of I don't know what's the term, connectedness of a lot of yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's. I mean, a lot of my books, I'd say about 90% of my books are basically like survival horror. So, I like to sort of like strip a lot of the like modern day, excesses away, and bring it down to a matter of survival, and just stripping away all the bullshit and just making it about what's really important, like family and friends and the world, stuff like that.
Do you think these? I mean, I think these human values have never went away. They've just become shrouded in modern times because of technology, etc. I mean, do you feel that we've lost touch with ourselves, and that is perhaps why we're drawn to survival horror, because it allows you to it allows you to look at what people look like whenever they cooperate or they don't in extreme situations.
Yeah, definitely. Especially in like the post-apocalyptic like subgenre. I know you mentioned Dave Moody earlier on.
Yeah, Dave Moody. I've met him. He's a lovely guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and I've met him a few times. And I've spoken to him. And,
love him.
He's absolutely great guy, and I think he was like one of the main inspirations for me, like writing like apocalyptic sort of stuff.
Really.
Yeah, I mean, I read his book Hater about 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I read it like one night, and I didn't really know who he was at all. So this is before I was on Facebook and before I was writing myself properly, and it just sort of really inspired me. And
so
I read the rest of his books. And
he acted as your inspiration, really, to do it yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely one of the ones that like sort of started me off. Yeah.
Well, yeah. The great thing about Dave Moody as well is he started off as a self-published guy, and by the end he had guys like Guillermo del Toro giving him quotes for the book.
Yeah, that's awesome, isn't it?
That's what an accolade to have Guillermo del Toro, who is a modern horror master, really. So one of the things I always loved about his books were, it's the same thing I think I'm gonna enjoy about yours when I read more of them, and that is that it's those basic elements of humanity that we live in a world, I think now, that is intensely superficial, and everybody is living this sort of facade through technology, and it's all sort of. It's just a veneer. People are getting depressed about imaginary issues as opposed to the very real issues that affect people in different areas of the globe. Real things, where in Western society we live in these massive, decadent, cultures, and we're disconnected. We're more connected through technology, but we're more disconnected than we've ever been from each other. So what I like about your stuff is that you're stripping it down. It's just about, it's the true essence of horror to me, and it's the exploration of the human psyche.
Oh, thanks, mate. It's just about stripping away all the, like you said, we live in such a, an advanced world, or the Western world anyway. I suppose it's a slow world actually. Don't want to sound too xenophobic.
Well, no. Western culture, shall we say?
That's me done. Damn it.
Your writing career is over, Rich.
That's it now. Sorry, damn it.
You've said the wrong thing on the wrong podcast. Well, to be fair, I think I've only got like 30 subscribers on YouTube, so don't worry about it too much.
Yeah, I mean, what I was trying to say in a better way would be that in the Western world we've got so many, we are privileged to be living where we are. And
very lucky guy.
We just make such like, it's all just a lot of it just seems silly, and we're not struggling, we're not starving, we're not. We get fresh water, we've got a roof over our heads, we've got all of our needs are met, and we still find these shitty little issues to like arguments and like to be divided on,
Yeah, I know, absolutely, and I agree with you. We have no context for what should be. Basically, we can't filter the issues anymore, can we? We become obsessed with obsessed with minutiae as we might become with much larger issues. Like I was talking to Pat Mills about it. The fact that there's more human slavery in today's world than there ever has been at any other point in the world. Yet nobody really talks about it, or nobody talks about Boko Haram. Nobody talks about what's happening in places like Gaza. All this stuff is sort of filtered for us. Yet in Western society, we're were offended because somebody won't use the correct gender pronoun, and I mean, it's that inability to differentiate between what is a massive thing, I think, and what is quite a what I view to be a small issue. But then again, I guess it is all a matter of perspective, and
well, you are a straight white privileged male.
yeah, I know. Well, I often refute this by saying I grew up in Belfast, and I was the exact opposite of privileged for a very many years. So whenever people go, oh, but you're a straight white privileged male, I'm like, no, I'm really not. I'm just a working class guy, and I didn't, for a long time, things over here were far from ideal. So it's one of those things. I don't buy into that. I think everybody has their own struggles, and a lot of it isn't to do with what your skin color is, but what nowadays anyway. But it's to do with your, what class you're in. Whether how much you make, whether you're, whether you're lucky enough to have been born into, a lot of money, or whether you're some dude who grew up in a housing estate. It doesn't matter what skin color you have or what what your culture is. It's about, where did you come from? Did you have opportunities? Were there people there to help you? Did you have money? Did you have a good background? And if you were born in some horrible conditions and you had no chance, and I've seen kids. I worked for a charity for a while. I've worked for various charities, and I've seen kids, irregardless of background, suffer these horrendous lives, and it was nothing to do with their skin color. So whenever I hear someone go, "Oh, you've got white privilege," I'm like, well, I've actually seen kids who were, of white ethnic background, who literally lived in hell. So for someone to sort of blithely say that, I always, it shocks me. I'm like, what a blanket statement to make about anybody. So it's kind of shocking, but
it's quite disgusting, really. I mean, if you're going to cut to some white bloke on a housing estate who hasn't got hasn't got any money, no prospects, and start, criticising him because of his privilege.
Yeah.
You'd be like, what are you talking about?
Well, it's funny. There was, because we're talking about horror. A film that sort of tackled that this year was actually Get Out.
Yeah.
And it was one of the directors. It was the two guys, Key and Peele, and I can't remember if it was Key or Peele who directed it.
It's Peele,
it was Peele, yeah. And apparently it is. I haven't seen it, but it's got really good reviews. And the reason, I think I read about his reasoning behind it, and it was that, as a black man, he felt he was viewed a certain way in Hollywood circles. And this was kind of like his answer to it, in that, these upper class white liberals sort of view the black body as, this virile form of masculinity that they want to inhabit. And I thought that was really interesting, because he can make that statement as a member of the African American community, and be applauded for it. So it's good that he is in a position to sort of say something about that, I guess.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I haven't seen it yet either, but I know some people who have seen it, and they have said that part of the film is like it's taking some pot shots at upper middle class liberals, who sort of treat, it's
Well, that's what it seems to be. It is. Yeah, I'm looking it up now. Jordan Peele, and it is. It stars Daniel Kaluuya. I love that guy. He's a great actor. As Chris, a black man who uncovers a disturbing secret when he meets the family of his white girlfriend. And let's have a little look and read a bit more. The critics praised the screenplay, the direction, the performances, satirical themes, and it's about a photographer, Chris Washington. He reluctantly agrees to meet the family of his white girlfriend. Okay, so it sort of deals with themes of racism, but also as we go along, it's sort of what's the end game here? What's the breakdown? So
what's going on behind the
what's going on? What's he awakens strapped to a chair in a basement. Spoiler alert, people who haven't seen this. A video presentation featuring Rose's grandfather Roman explains that the family transplants the brains of white people into black bodies. The consciousness of the host remains in the sunken place, watching what is happening, but powerless to change anything. Hudson tells Chris he wants his body so he can gain Chris's sight and artistic talent. We've been talking about like our irks at modern society, but we haven't actually talked
to. We've been putting the world to rights, so it's okay.
Yeah, we've been putting the world to rights, but we haven't talked too much about actual horror. So let's talk about authors that have interested you in the genre. I mean, you mentioned Dave Moody. I obviously love his stuff. I noticed that you've also contributed to it was a George A. Romero anthology. Stories of the Dead. So obviously you have a love, with The Last Plague and stuff like that. You have a love of the zombie genre, things like that. What sort of authors and what genres of within horror are really your thing? What's your jam?
Well, I'd definitely say like we've already spoken about, like the post-apocalyptic, subgenre, and the zombie genre. I just love zombies. Ever since I watched what was it? Yeah, I watched Dawn of the Dead, like the Romero original.
Yeah.
Back when I was I think it was like 15 or 16. I watched it like on Channel 4 about like 12:30.
That's great. It's so good. And that's when Channel 4 had some really good TV on.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I saw a lot of films sort of that are on late, and you just
it was
sit in bed and watch it, and it's
a lot
of cool stuff.
Yeah. I mean, Channel 4 before Big Brother, Channel 4 had some solid horror movies, Godzilla movies, foreign cinema. It was bloody great, and I remember watching a lot of anime and stuff like that on Channel 4. And obviously nowadays it's just sort of reality TV and sort of edgy, sort of attempts at news and stuff like that. Whereas I remember Channel 4. Oh shit! I hate it. I totally hate it. But I used to love Channel 4 so much because it had, I used to love the Diary of Adrian Mole and Press Gang and stuff like that.
I remember that. Yeah.
It's God, it was bloody brilliant. So it's so. I hate it now. I'm sure kids nowadays are loving it, but I remember the days of. Do you remember Vids used to be on at 3:00 in the morning? With
I remember that.
Nige and Steph, and they would review sort of shit B movies and that sort of thing, and that is exactly what I want. I want to be sitting up at 1:30 in the morning watching zombie flesh eaters or something like that.
Oh yeah, brilliant!
Bloody great Italian horror.
Films and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The real like sleazy, not over sleazy, but like the exploitation films and all that. The B movie, like just
It's funny because even though the horror movies were kind of they were shitty, mass produced, and they were clearly just being knocked out with zombies in them, especially the Italian stuff because it was popular.
Yeah.
But if you go back and watch them, they're all really good, especially when you compare it to their modern counterparts, which are all. I mean, I saw some of the recent zombie stuff. It's like the Day of the Dead type stuff, and I thought it was really unwatchable. Whereas I could go back and watch a shitty Italian zombie movie and just love it. I don't know why that is. I think Romero had some brilliant social allegories that he worked into his stories, but even the Italian stuff and Cannibal Holocaust, all that sort of stuff, it was horrific stuff, but there was something infinitely watchable about it, and I don't know what, I can't put my finger on what it was.
Probably because they're actually made by people who cared about them, cared about the films they were making. And, sort of, they probably put so much into it, and it was their passion to make these films. Even if it was like just like a first-time director who was like making some shitty like zombies from hell movie. They were just sort of doing it for a lot of them were just doing it for the love of it, and just sort of, it was pure, I suppose. But whereas now, sort of, a lot of it is like sort of cash grabs and sort of knockoffs of,
Yeah, it seems insincere, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I watched. I didn't watch all of it. I watched Day of the Dead: Bloodlines, and it's loosely based on like Romero's Day of the Dead.
Right. Okay.
But it's just fucking awful. I watched like 20 minutes and.
Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. My wife phoned me in the middle of the recording, and as I'm using my phone for the recording device, how incredibly unprofessional of me. But Rich, do you remember what we were talking about before we rudely got interrupted?
What was now? Shitty zombie films, wasn't it?
Shitty zombie films. Yes. You were talking about Day of the Dead, Bloodlines.
Yeah, it's awful. It was just, I don't know. It was like they were zombies, but they were fast zombies. I mean, I'm not fussed either way with zombies, but they were just sort of like, they were just so generic, and the acting was appalling, and there was supposed to be like a bunker where there's like one of the last outposts of like human civilization, and like it's full of people with like perfect skin and nice haircuts and good-looking people, and it was just ridiculous. And I thought, well, I got about 20 minutes, and I was like, well, enough of this. It's just awful. And just so like, just seemed lazy, And
it didn't have that sort of attention to detail.
Not at all. No, it was.
Yeah, that's
there was no heart to it. Nothing at all. It was just.
And I mean, whenever you watch stuff like The Walking Dead, the first couple of seasons I thought were great. I'd read the comic, and what I really appreciate about that sort of stuff is that it has a really interesting attention to detail, like little things that you wouldn't necessarily, consider, like the basic. Ways that people are going to have to survive, what you're going to have to do, the compromises that you're going to have to make, and the idea that you would have these sort of porcelain people who had survived and come out intact, as opposed to whenever you look at The Walking Dead, and by I think it's the third or fourth season, they're all completely emotionally broken. They've had to sacrifice people, they've had to kill other people to get supplies, they've had to do horrible, hideous things, and it's as much about them trying to live with themselves as it is live in this apocalypse, because they're all so broken and traumatized.
It's I mean, I watched The Walking Dead up to the previous season, so I'm a little bit behind. I've read some of the comics. I've got some at home. And, I haven't read them in a while, but it's definitely like the top level of zombie fiction, you might call.
Well, I mean, I think Robert Kirkman, that the zombie genre was so tired out by the time that he went to write that he had to pitch it to Image as it was sort of like an alien in plague type
Yeah, I
scenario.
remember that. I remember.
Yeah, they didn't want a zombie thing because zombies, you really have to come at zombies from an interesting, unauthentic angle because what you're talking about, the idea that these heartless zombie movies are just getting churned out for a buck is true.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a very, because, I know personally I'm a big fan of the zombie genre, but I also feel that there's people out there who are just like stick zombie in the title and people will buy it or they'll show up or whatever, and it's heartless and just complete crud.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, if you just go on Amazon and just look at the post-apocalyptic section, it's massive and it does really well as well.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of it is there's a lot of really good stuff, but then again, there's also a lot of crap.
Well, can I ask you a question, Rich? Because you'd be in a good position to answer this. Have you found that horror fans are a lot more invested than your average fan? Because I've noticed that there's something about horror fans in particular. Maybe it's just me looking from the outside in, but they all seem completely rabid about their interest.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I mean, I really haven't had any bad experiences with horror fans and readers.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't say I'm not trying to say they're bad people or anything. Just that they're incredibly that they're incredibly invested. There's two types of really invested fans. Oh well, actually that's a lie. There's loads of types of invested fans. From Trekkies to Star Wars fans, but I always found that the horror fans were really hardcore. Maybe it's just me. I don't know.
Yeah, they are. I mean, if you sort of go to a horror convention, I've been to a few now, and it's been quite a lot up in Birmingham and sort of up north. And if you go to them and it's full of people who are really committed and obsessed with horror, and it's awesome, really, because you've got people dressing up as all sorts of characters from horror films. It's brilliant. It's there's definitely a love for horror. It's not there's no fakers there, really.
Yeah, no fakers. Yeah, that's what I mean. Everybody's really invested.
Definitely. They're really, really passionate about it, and it's great to see.
I think it's great to see, and I mean, it makes me think about how a lot in another thing I've seen in modern media is that that move to point out fandoms as being toxic or dangerous or derogatory or whatever. What I find fandoms to be largely is just really, really passionate, sometimes to the point of being psychotically invested in the characters that they love or the genre that they love, and sometimes that's because, sometimes the reason they're so touchy and get angry about things so quickly is because I guess they have such an investment in it. But surely that's a good thing that you've created a product or a genre or whatever that is so magical for these people that they're like, I can't get enough of it, and I want you to, obviously maybe there's creators out there who feel it's slightly stifling, but I feel like if you work within a certain mandate and you can still create these masterpieces within these genres. It's just about it's not so much about being stifled by the fan base as working within their range of expectations.
Yeah. It's like you said about the efforts to paint fan bases or fanboys in particular as toxic. I mean, there's always going to be a toxic element to every group of people, but I think social media just blows it up out of proportion. And people say stuff on social media they don't mean, and then then they calm down a bit and go, "I shouldn't have put that," and then it's too late because once it's on the internet, it's forever, basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Star Wars stuff recently. I mean, I don't really doubt there are some proper like toxic, misogynistic fans
Yeah,
who are like just a bit mental.
I agree. Yeah,
I think a lot of it is overblown. I think a lot of it is used to sort of generate clicks in
clickbait
news
media.
media.
Yeah,
It's like sort of trendy news outlets like Vice and Slate and all
yeah,
these
yeah, and
BuzzFeed.
yeah.
Fuck BuzzFeed, hate them.
I couldn't agree more because
They're just worse, aren't they? Just
oh my
horrendous.
god. Well, I feel like a lot of their stuff is blatantly sensationalist, controversial, smearing trash,
Yeah,
and it is designed to either entrance people who think like that or offend people who don't. But either way, it will draw in the clicks, and it starts conversations, and it seems like the last throes of a dying beast that's trying to grip you as it goes down. It's trying to take you, with it, because the media is not what it was, and I feel like I remember whenever I used to read something specifically for the articles, and there's a great magazine that's come out recently, Comic Scene UK, and it's guys who are passionate about the stuff writing articles about it. Pat Mills writes for it, and that's the sort of stuff I want to read. I remember whenever I would read stuff like Empire, and I would read Fangoria and stuff like that. It was, or Star-Lord magazine or whatever it was, and you read this stuff because you were interested, you loved the articles, but now all that has been supplanted by easy to gather clicks by saying something outrageous, or making an accusation, or saying someone said such and such, and you should be really offended about it. And it's easier to do that than write an article that potentially nobody is going to read, or maybe just a niche amount of people are going to read.
Yeah, it's a bit sad, really, isn't it? I mean, because I think part of the problem as well is that some of the people who work for these sites are they're writing their articles or such through their ideological lens.
Yeah.
Where they're looking at it from perspective of of their politics or whatever, or their social beliefs, and then and I just want to hear about the actual material and the actual
whenever you're writing
what's being talked about. I want to hear about why some character is like a massive bonus for some, I don't know. It's so hard to say. It's just like
whenever you were writing stuff, mate, do you find that your ideologies slip into your characters? Do you write through a lens of experience and or well, not experience per se? Do you write through a lens of I want people to see a subversive hidden message, or do you write purely for I want to write something that's entertaining, it's gonna shock and scare people, and leave them with this sort of vivid world I've created?
Yeah, but usually the story is the main thing. I basically wrote to entertain people. Yeah,
Plot based. Yeah.
A few of my sort of views might slip in, but not. I don't want to preach to people about anything. But I don't believe you write fiction to preach to people and try and convince them of your own beliefs and that. It's just ridiculous. And it's not something I would want to read.
Yeah.
Definitely not write anyway.
I think there is stuff that can be just straight up horror entertainment. One of my favourite examples of that is 30 Days of Night. Steve Niles. It started off as a Steve Niles comic. It was adapted as a movie, and it's one of my favourite horror comics, but it's also one of my all-time favorite horror movies. I love it to the point where
it's so good, mate.
it's great.
I've got most of the 30 Days a Night graphic novels here. Right?
Yeah, it's Steve Niles and I believe who was the artist? Ben Templesmith.
Yeah, Templesmith. Yeah.
You know, I have to say that it was the sort of idea. It was just a really high concept. The idea that this town is in darkness for 30 days. These vampires would obviously take advantage of this. It was sort of a genius concept, but especially in the film, the way it was executed, it was pure survival horror. And where if you look at Romero zombie films, George A. Romero always had a subtle message. He wrote social allegories that were embedded in his movies. So you could watch Night of the Living Dead. It sort of acts as an allegory for racism in the 60s and 70s. You could watch Dawn of the Dead. It's an allegory for consumerism. Day of the Dead for the military-industrial complex. Whereas if you look at 30 Days of Night and stuff like that, it is just purely entertaining. And I love that sort of stuff where it's just, it's humans against, an insurmountable odds. So.
Exactly. It's such a simple premise as well, but it's a genius premise as well. It's.
Yeah.
I know. It's great. I love that film. It's just so brutal as well. Just like, it doesn't give a fuck, does it? Really? Just,
you're actually making me want to watch it. I think I think another thing it shows something with The Thing in that it's this claustrophobic, who can we trust type movie in this frozen environment, and that those are the best sort of horrors for me, where you sort of manage to make it claustrophobic and no one knows who you can trust. Who there's that level of paranoia.
It's very powerful, isn't it?
Oh god, yeah, and it's you're playing on all the worst human traits, and all the worst human emotions. They're all conjured up whenever you make films or write books like that. And it's funny because Stephen King is another author that is massively popular, and I love his stuff. I can't get enough of King, and I think his Dark Tower books are some of the best fantasy works that have ever been written. But one thing I've found with King is that, with the exception of his non-fiction work like Shawshank Redemption or The Green Mile or things like that, the majority of the time King is just writing an entertaining story, usually set somewhere around Maine. He's not trying to really change your views on anything, and as opposed to what I was talking to Patrick Mills about last week, King just seems to be telling disturbing stories. There's no real, not that I can discern anyway. He has some little bits and pieces of political commentary, but mostly not.
Yeah, he's that's the thing. I mean, even if like you said about Romero with his Dead films, even though there's nothing wrong with having a societal bit of social commentary in there, because he does it really skillfully. And he blends it into the film
subversively.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not good when the message becomes more important than the actual film itself. Or the actual
yes, and that's whenever it becomes a bludgeon, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, one of the best horror movies I saw recently, and it was really it's a story about, if you look at it, the fundamental underpinnings of the main story are about family and connectedness, and in the case of the protagonists of the film, it's about this guy's relationship with his daughter and being a better father, and that was Train to Busan.
Oh yeah, I love that film. Yeah.
And it is one of the best zombie films I've ever seen. But it's about cooperation and helping each other, and about this guy building a better relationship with his daughter and ultimately sacrificing himself for his daughter.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I
Spoiler,
thought, yeah, spoilers. Sorry, I mean, but it's that you can look at it as that, or you can go, this is just a really kick-ass zombie movie.
Yeah,
Because
it does have those like themes of between the father and the daughter, and the stuff about people helping each other. It adds to the film. It makes the film. It fleshes it out for
it's more nuanced.
And it makes it adds so much more to it.
Yeah,
I think like Ramirez, it's done in a really skillful way, and it's the ending's like a gut punch, isn't it? It's just
totally. It's an ingenious ending, and like you say, I've very rarely seen horror movies that have sort of impacted me as much.
Yeah,
and I've been left, So, guys, if you get a chance, go and watch Last Train, or it's Train to Busan, or is it Last Train to Busan?
Busan, yeah.
Train to Busan. If you haven't seen it, it's a great movie. So, coming back to horror graphic novels, before we started the podcast, you said that you'd read a few, and that obviously it's something that would interest you. Who other than Steve Niles have you dipped into?
I've got Crossed by Garth Ennis.
Oh, okay.
Which I love. I've only got the first volume.
Uh-huh.
I haven't read any of the rest yet. But first volume's so good that I've reread it about 10 times. Or 20 times, maybe.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
So good, yeah. It's so I bought it a few years back because it's post-apocalyptic sort of stuff, and I wasn't overly prepared for it in a way.
It really, it's really,
it's awesome though. It's great.
It's really horrific. It's actually some of the worst gore that I've ever seen.
It's crazy. Yeah.
I've read a lot of I've read Ennis's sequels, which have all been fantastic. But David Lapham took over for a while. He was the Stray Bullets creator, and he wrote a couple of volumes, as did the great wizard himself, Alan Moore.
That's Crossed 100. Is that Crossed 100?
Crossed 100, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was really good as well.
Yeah.
But the David Lapham stuff seriously turned me off, Crossed, if I'm honest. And it's not because I don't like David Lapham. I think his Stray Bullets is amazing. But it was almost like the gore took preference to the story in his stuff. And I found some of the stuff that happened pushed my threshold to the point where I was like, oh, I don't think I wanted to see that, and I'm not a man who's easily disturbed, but there was stuff that happened in his Crossed. I think it was the family values. I think it was the sequel. I'm not 100% sure, but I read it and I thought, oh God, I think I've seen something so horrific and awful that I'm not sure how to process that. And I read it all anyway, but his Crossed was so gory that it turned me off. Crossed for a while, and I came back when Ennis came back on the title, because ultimately I feel like, irregardless of how off the leash Ennis is, he always has a tight plot, and he did something. He took the zombie genre to its next natural conclusion, and he took it into the human plague genre. Yeah. So I would recommend then, if you read the first one, you loved it, look for the other volumes that he did, because I think he did them with the artist Jason Burrows as well. But
pretty good, yeah.
And while we're on the subject of Avatar, did you read any of Alan Moore's stuff for Avatar, like Neonomicon, or
Yeah, I've got the first volume of Neonomicon somewhere around here.
Disturbing stuff?
Yeah, that was a bit the bit with the deep ones.
Oh God.
The female FBI agent was a bit.
That was hard to read. I found it deeply unnerving. But
Yeah,
again,
definitely.
it was boundary pushing stuff. The thing about Moore is that you just can't get away from the quality of his writing. Sometimes he writes things that I find very hard to stomach, but
Yeah.
he is such a quality writer that I read that, and there's actually a sequel to it, Providence, I believe it's called, which I haven't read, but again, I think it's more that Lovecraftian inspired. And that brings me to, you've got a book that's actually Lovecraftian inspired yourself. Is it Black Star Sun?
Yeah, Black Star, Black Sun, yeah.
Black Star, Black Sun, and that was sort of Lovecraftian Cthulhu type stuff. That's where your inspiration for it came from, wasn't it?
Pardon?
That's where your inspiration for the book came from. It was sort of Lovecraftian based.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. Yeah, and I've been a big fan of Lovecraft for years now, and all the themes of sort of cosmic horror, and all the stuff about how humans are nothing compared to the alien gods and all that sort of stuff. I find it really intriguing.
Yeah, the idea that we're like this little tiny ant species, and that there's these giant sleeping dark ones, that the mere idea of them is enough to send your average human spiraling into insanity. It's
awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like this guy was doing horror like this, like some of the best horror, like Mary Shelley, Bram Stoker. This was all sort of turn of the century stuff. So H.P. Lovecraft, he was, this guy was, it was sort of turn of the century blogging, basically. He was part of these little writers groups, and they would write these little periodicals and distribute them among themselves. And it's fascinating because he worked out this massive mythos, this huge cast of elder gods, and it's similar to sort of what Tolkien would do with his Middle Earth gods and stuff like that. These guys were really invested in their mythologies back then, and it's very rarely, maybe with Clive Barker or someone like that, you would see that level of craft nowadays, where they're so invested that they're going to create this huge pantheon of characters and really draw the reader in with the mythology of it.
Totally, yeah. It takes an amazing amount of skill to sort of set it up and just to construct it, really. I mean,
it's next level stuff. It's really, I mean, it's. I think if you look at Lovecraft, it probably came from his desire to be a scientist, which he could never fulfill due to his inability at maths. But he always had this sort of a desire to see into the cosmos and to know more, and that's where he conjured his elder gods from. With guys like Tolkien, he was a language professor, I believe, and
I think he was,
and that's where he made up the languages for his dwarves and elves and stuff like that, and it's utterly fascinating because it's just a level of detail that and I love to see it, because it's that sort of stuff that it's a great example would be for me that level of detail, and it's pedantry that comes from people who are fans becoming involved as well. So it's like one of my favorite examples is Transformers, which I love. The modern Transformers stuff is massive. It's massively pedantic. It's got this really huge mythology that people think it's just a kids cartoon, but it's got like this 30-40 year following, right up into the current IDW comics, which are ending soon, sadly. But it is people have written this culture into they've got their own religions, they've got their own relationship customs and things like this. That to me is just a craft, and an eye for detail, and an investment that I love to see in any sort of franchise. It's what really draws me in, and I guess you would see it with oh god, I had an example and it's went clean out of my head. But Lord of the Rings, things like that, and indeed Lovecraft. Like we were saying, he's just and Robert E. Howard, who was sort of a writer, and I think they both sort of were friends, maybe.
But first off, they corresponded with each other.
Yeah.
And they became friends. Yeah, and I know I think Lovecraft allowed. Well, they both borrowed from each other's work as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's I love that. I love that there was this friendship, but also that they dabbled in each other's works and they created these massive mythologies. Like the idea of Robert E. Howard had this sort of Sumerian age. It was this lost age of humanity. And he wrote about it right back in Bran McMahon, straight up to Conan, and then I believe there was Conan. The follow up to Conan was something like it was an Atlantean character, although I can't remember. Maybe it was Cole.
I think it might have been. Yeah, I can't remember. It does ring a bell. Yeah.
Yeah, but I love all that level of craft. Whenever you were writing something, do you would you say that you sort of focus in on a core set of characters, or do you like to do broader world building type stuff?
So it depends what project I'm working on, really. I mean, I do love the world building. But it is very time consuming.
Yeah,
it adds an extra level to the work. And so,
yeah.
But it is worth it, I suppose. And it always helps to have, sort of, fully rounded characters who can live in that world, and it just makes it all the better, doesn't it, really?
Big time.
Like with Maniac Gods, the villain is called Dr. Riding.
Okay.
And he's a sort of a mysterious man, like a cult, sort of like cult leader who like wears a bronze mask. And he has connections to other dimensions and stuff like that. And he's basically the main antagonist of the book. And I really enjoyed writing him. I mean, it doesn't appear all that much in the book itself, but when he does appear, it just sort of, the shit's going to go down, and he does appear. And he's totally. He's not evil per se. He's just amoral. He just regards people as neither good or evil, just things he can use. And it's just that his morals are just above the level of people. It's just like.
Yeah, so he's sort of. It's almost like humans are a base material for him, and he's operating on a different spectrum in terms of. I mean, I guess it's that whole Hitler analogy where Hitler was never at Auschwitz or Birkenau. He just sort of signed a bit of paper regarding what should be done with the prisoners there, and he didn't regard them, as humans. It's that level of monster, I guess. And it is fascinating. So this character is obviously he's a psychopath or a sociopath at least.
I mean, I suppose. Well, he is evil, but he doesn't see himself as evil.
Yeah, well,
he just sees himself as above the mundane problems of humanity, and he wants to sort of ascend.
And where did you derive your inspiration for Dr. Writings from?
Well, there's sort of a few characters in horror films and books. I'm trying to think now. Part of the inspiration was who's the villain in Mad Max Fury Road?
Fury Road.
Um,
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
what's his name now? Damn it.
Look, well,
Immortan Joe.
Immortan Joe.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
There's a tiny bit of Immortan Joe in him.
Okay,
And
yeah.
then like people like oh god, have you seen a film called The Devil Rides Out?
No, I haven't, but I want to.
It's based on a book by Dennis Wheatley. It was written. Well, of course, the film was from the '60s. It starred Christopher Lee, and I think the book was written in maybe the '40s or something, or the '50s maybe. But there's a the leader of the satanic cult in the book or in the film is very sort of English and very sort of dominating and like he's a sort of oldish man, but he's like he's a complete zealot, you know. Dr. Riding is partly based on him. I think it's called Morkata, I think. Yeah, really good film, really good character.
Okay, well, I'll have to actually check it out because it's a film that I've been meaning to get round to watch for a long time. It keeps popping up.
It hasn't aged that well, but it's still a really good film. You know what I mean?
It hasn't popped up in my recommendations in a long time, but but I do remember seeing it a while back, and I was like, oh, I should really watch that. I should actually get around to watching that because I do love. I just love horror from different sort of generations. Like a lot of my favorite stuff is sort of Hammer from the 60s and 70s, stuff like that. It looks kind of schlocky now, but it really it has, I don't know, there's something about it. I love old the old Hound of the Baskerville stuff that they were doing with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. All that sort of stuff is it just, I don't know, it's got something about it. You could tell that they really loved doing it. Like Dracula, Prince of Blood, all that sort of stuff. It's just really, really bloody great. So yeah, man. I mean, I'll have to check that movie out. And while I'm looking at it, at the start of the monologue, at the start of the podcast, I'd mentioned a title called Infidel. Now, a lot of people have sort of been trying to slam it for social justice underpinnings, but I actually don't think they play too heavily in the plot. And it is just a really bloody good horror, I have to say. It's one of the best horrors I've read in a while, because we were talking about claustrophobic stuff with Steve Niles, 30 Days of Night, and how you enjoyed Crossed. Check out Infidel. I think you will really like it. It's coming out from Image at the minute. That and another title called Gideon Falls are my two favourite horrors at the minute. And oh man, it just occurred to me. I was like, I should say to Rich while I'm on here, and just go, you gotta check these out, man. You're gonna enjoy them, But yeah. Well, listen, we're gonna have to wrap up soon because I got cut off midway through this because my wife tried to phone me. I've got to make that phone call. I got to phone her back. And plus, I don't want to keep you here all night because I know you got to get up and do stuff in the morning. And you've got, is it a daughter?
Yeah. She's Willow. She's four next week.
Is she named after Willow and Buffy?
Pardon?
Is she named after Willow and Buffy?
No, she's not. But I used to be a massive Buffy fan, so it's a weird coincidence, isn't it?
Hold on, can you hear this?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, hear you now. Yeah. She wasn't exclusively named after Willow, but I used to be a massive Buffy fan when I was like younger. So yeah, maybe subconsciously the name,
Absolutely. Well, I loved the Buffy TV series. I'm sorry about that. We were mid conversation there. Someone was banging something out in my back garden, or sorry, not my back garden, my backyard. Another mark of professionalism for the podcast. But I mean, I love the Buffy TV series because it was one of those things I came to late. I loved the Blade movies, and I didn't think anything could be as good as those. So whenever I saw Buffy, I was like, oh, it's just gonna be a cut price Blade. And then I actually watched the show, and it turned out it had loads of really fun, well written horror, but also really brilliant characters, so well realized. And Joss Whedon, the creator, said that it was supposed to be the arc of someone's life, and it felt like that. So you went through the highs and the lows. Yeah. So I love the show. So that's what your daughter subconsciously.
It wouldn't surprise me. Plus the film Willow, with
oh yeah.
Remember that with Val Kilmer in with the
Yes, I love that movie. Oh my god,
such a good. That was like a childhood love.
Dude, I love the movie Willow. The movie Willow. Mad Mardigan, the greatest swordsman who ever lived. Willow Wolfgood. I actually went as far as to read the Chris Claremont, George Lucas books that followed the movie. Shadow Dawn and Shadow Moon and all that. I read those, and they were considerably grimmer than the actual film, because spoiler alert, the main cast, with the exception of Willow, all get killed in the first act. So I was like, what? Yeah, so it's an entirely different cast for the rest of the books, except for Willow himself, who changes his name to, I believe it is Thorn Drumheller for some reason. I can't remember why. Honestly, I haven't read them in about 20 years. But the movie itself is just an absolutely bloody brilliant film. Ron Howard, I believe, directed it, and he was Ron Howard directed it, and he was just that was when he was just starting out, and it was fantastic. Well, here, listen, Rich, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Really, this is the first time we've ever chatted. We've been Facebook friends for a long time, but we haven't actually ever chatted before. And since you've got your book Maniac Gods coming out, or it's out, actually, I should say, I thought now would be a good time to get in touch and have a chat on the podcast. So everyone,
it's been a really good time. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Well, I've had a great time, and everyone go out and grab a copy of Rich's Maniac Gods or one of his extensive back catalogue. I picked up King Carrion and Maniac Gods, and I'm really looking forward to reading them. And listen, take it easy, mate. And if you get anything you would like to say before we sign off here.
Nothing I can think of straight away. No, just.
I put you on the spot. I'm sorry, I put you on the spot. I was like, the final word from Rich.
Really appreciate being on the podcast, mate. Thanks a lot.
Oh, listen, it's been my pleasure. It's been my pleasure. And listen, we will. I'm sure we'll get together and do this again sometime. That'd be good, yeah. So listen, this is all from me and Rich. If you've got any comments, as usual, leave them in the comments section. Love to hear all the feedback from everybody, and it's great to hear from you, the guys who listen, all 5 of you. I'm just kidding. It's great to hear from you guys, because we really love making a community and having some feedback, and everybody's here for a good time. So here, listen, take care, guys, and we'll see you next time on Considering Comic Books. Thanks for watching the video, and if you enjoyed it, please comment below. I'd love to hear from you. You can follow me at Consider Comics on Twitter, and that's Consider_comics, and you can check out my own work with my artistic collaborator, very talented Ryan Brown, over at his website, ryanbrownart.com. Where the first part of our free online webcomic, Esther the Relique, is available for free. Please enjoy, and if you like it or hate it, and you've got any criticism or feedback, we would love to hear from you.